Deep underground, the walls remember what the surface has long forgotten. These are the caves that remember, natural vaults preserving stories etched by fire and time. By the end of this journey, you will understand how humanity's first artists used the earth itself as their canvas, leaving messages that survived for tens of thousands of years. We will uncover how a single cave painting can rewrite history and why fire, the very element we fear, became an unexpected guardian of our past. What does our deepest history tell you about the need to create something permanent? Stone itself becomes the perfect guardian of memory. While the world above ground changes with every season, a cave's environment remains almost perfectly still. This is the secret to its incredible power of preservation. Think of a typical forest floor where a fallen leaf rots away in a single year. Now, place that same leaf deep inside a limestone cave. The temperature never swings from freezing to boiling. The humidity stays constant. Without these dramatic shifts, the processes of decay slow to a near standstill. But the protection goes even deeper. Water, filtering down from the surface, travels through layers of rock, picking up dissolved minerals along the way. When this mineral-rich water seeps into a cave and meets the air, it evaporates, leaving behind a microscopic curtain of calcite. Over centuries, this gentle, persistent drip builds a transparent shield over anything on the wall, including the charcoal lines drawn by an artist in the deep past. This is how a drawing survives for 30,000 years. It is encased in stone, protected from the air, and hidden from the fading power of the sun. The most stunning example is Chauvet Cave in France. Its entrance was sealed by a colossal rockfall approximately 23,000 years ago, creating a perfect time capsule. Inside, the paintings of lions, bears, and rhinos were so fresh and vivid when discovered in 1994 that researchers initially doubted their authenticity. They looked like they had been drawn just yesterday. This makes you wonder how many other sealed entrances are hidden by hillsides or forests. What entire galleries of human expression are waiting in the dark, perfectly preserved, holding stories we have not yet dreamed of. That sealed door at Chauvet is a perfect example of the great challenge that came next. How do you prove the age of a masterpiece when its artist lived 30,000 years ago? For decades after the discovery of Altamira Cave in Spain, many experts refused to believe that such sophisticated art could be prehistoric. They were trapped by their own assumptions about human progress. The proof, it turns out, was hidden in the materials themselves, waiting for science to learn how to ask the right questions. The key breakthrough was radiocarbon dating. Every living thing absorbs a tiny, predictable amount of radioactive carbon from the atmosphere. When it dies, that clock starts ticking as the carbon decays at a steady rate. By measuring how much remains in a piece of charcoal used to draw a mammoth or a bison, scientists can calculate its age with stunning precision. This method transformed guesswork into irrefutable timelines. But what about the art you cannot touch? Accelerator mass spectrometry is the answer. It is a process so sensitive it can date a single speck of charcoal, smaller than a grain of salt, lifted carefully from the surface of a painting. This means a masterpiece can be dated without a single mark being left upon it. There is another clock, too, built by the cave itself. Remember that curtain of calcite, the stone shield that forms over the paintings. Scientists can use uranium-thorium dating on these tiny mineral layers. By dating the calcite that formed on top of a hand stencil, they establish a minimum age. The art beneath it must be even older. This very technique was used in the Maros Pankep caves of Indonesia, where hand stencils were revealed to be around 40,000 years old. This one discovery shattered the old idea that Europe was the sole cradle of human artistic genius. It showed that across the globe, and at virtually the same moment in deep time, our ancestors felt the same powerful urge to make their mark. Now imagine a researcher walking through a gallery of ancient bison, not with a drill or a scalpel, but with a handheld scanner. Emerging technologies like portable X-ray fluorescence are making this possible. These devices can analyze the elemental composition of pigments right through the transparent calcite shield, revealing the artist's recipe without ever making contact. What other secrets will we unlock when we can read the walls without a trace? These technological eyes can also see the very first steps of a long-lost artist. While radiocarbon dating gives us a timeline, multispectral imaging reveals the creative journey itself. This advanced photographic method captures light far beyond what our eyes can perceive, from ultraviolet to infrared. In the cave of Pigments in France, researchers aimed these special cameras at what seemed to be a simple field of painted dots. Under the gaze of multispectral imaging, a hidden pattern emerged. The dots were not random. They formed sophisticated constellations, a map of the night sky as it was known to the people who lived there. This was not just decoration. It was a record of prehistoric star knowledge etched onto the rock. The technology works by illuminating the cave wall with specific wavelengths of light. Different minerals and pigments absorb and reflect this light in unique ways, exposing details that have faded into invisibility over the centuries. This process can reveal preliminary sketches made with charcoal or ochre, corrections where the artist changed their mind, and faint elements that have been lost to time. It shows us that these masterpieces were not created in a single, spontaneous burst. They were planned, drafted, and revised. Perhaps most remarkably, this imaging has uncovered that many cave walls are palimpsests. This term, borrowed from medieval scribes who reused parchment, describes a surface that has been written on, then written over. In caves across Europe, multispectral analysis shows that new animals were deliberately painted over older ones, sometimes generations later. The wall was not just a canvas, it was a living document, a sacred space where each generation added its own chapter to an ongoing story. At Cova de la Vila in Spain, infrared photography detected a procession of additional figures surrounding the main painted panel, human forms that had been completely invisible. These ghostly processions suggest ceremonial gatherings, a community participating in a story told on the wall. What other narratives are hiding just beneath the surface, waiting for the right light to bring them back into view? Fire was far more than a simple light source in the depths of these caves. It was a tool of creation and a guardian of memory. While we instinctively associate flames with destruction, ancient artists wielded fire with a sophisticated understanding of its chemical power. In the very act of illuminating their work, they were also preserving it. The soot from their torches and fat burning lamps did not just stain the walls. Over centuries, it deposited a thin, protective carbon layer over the artwork beneath, a shield against moisture and microbial decay. This was an unintentional gift from generations of visitors, a veil of protection built from the residue of their presence. The relationship between fire and art was often far more deliberate. Take the famous black outlines of the great bulls in Lascaux cave. The pigment used was manganese dioxide. Analysis suggests this mineral was not simply dug up and applied. It was likely processed with fire, heated in a controlled manner to transform its structure and create a richer, more stable black that would bind powerfully to the limestone canvas. This was not random experimentation. It was early chemistry, a recipe passed down through generations. This knowledge of thermal transformation appears across the globe. In South Africa's Blombos Cave, archaeologists uncovered a 100,000-year-old artist's toolkit, complete with abalone shells used for mixing paint. Nearby, they found evidence of hearths where lumps of ochre were intentionally heated. The fire altered the iron-rich mineral, changing its color from a yellowish red to a deep, vibrant crimson. These artists were not just using the materials they found, they were actively improving them, using fire as a catalyst to unlock a more permanent and potent palette. Even the cave itself was modified by this careful use of heat. In some chambers, evidence suggests that ancient people built fires directly against the walls. The heat from these blazes did more than provide warmth or light for a ceremony. It hardened the rock surface, making it less porous and more suitable for painting. Furthermore, this thermal shock can accelerate the very process of calcite formation, encouraging that transparent stone skin to grow more quickly over the artwork. So the fire that lit the artist's hand also helped to seal their work for eternity. How did they first discover that the element which could consume everything could also be used to make things last? Their understanding, born from countless hours in flickering torchlight, turned the greatest threat to their world into one of its most powerful protectors. The chemical makeup of a single paint stroke can speak of journeys across entire landscapes. This is the power of geochemical analysis, a third technique that deciphers the ancient recipes and long-forgotten trade routes hidden within the pigments themselves. Every source of colored earth, every quarry of ochre, possesses a unique chemical fingerprint. This fingerprint is a blend of trace elements and mineral impurities, a signature that remains unchanged even after thousands of years on a cave wall. By analyzing a tiny sample of pigment, scientists can match this signature to its precise point of origin. The discoveries have been astounding. In numerous European caves, the vibrant red ochre used to paint bison and handprints did not come from the local riverbank. It was mined from quarries located hundreds of kilometers away. This reveals something profound. It was not just about finding a color. It was about acquiring the right color, a specific red earth that held a deep symbolic or spiritual power for the community. The material itself was sacred, worth traveling great distances for or trading valuable goods to obtain. This evidence points to extensive, sophisticated exchange networks that connected groups of people across vast territories long before the rise of agriculture or cities. To understand the artist's method, scientists use tools like X-ray diffraction. This technique identifies the exact crystalline structure of the minerals in the pigment, distinguishing between different types of iron oxides that create reds and yellows. It tells us not just what color they used, but precisely which mineral version of that color they selected. Another process, chromatography, can detect the ghost of a binding agent. It can identify the microscopic residues of animal fats or plant resins that were mixed with the powdered minerals to turn them into a paste that would stick to the rock. This transforms a simple drawing from a dusting of color into a deliberate, engineered paint. A powerful example comes from Nawala Gabonmang in northern Australia. Here, geochemical analysis of brilliant white clay pigments revealed they were not local. They originated from a sacred quarry site a full 60 kilometers away, across difficult terrain. This was not a casual choice. The material was chosen for its cultural significance, carried on a long journey because of the stories and power it contained. So when you look at a cave painting, you are not just seeing an image. You are seeing the end point of an epic voyage, a testament to the value our ancestors placed on the right to create something permanent. What other tales of pilgrimage and connection are written in the invisible chemistry of these ancient walls? These invisible journeys of pigment lead us directly to the hands that held them. Who were these Paleolithic artisans? The sheer sophistication of the work suggests they were not mere hobbyists. The confident, flowing lines and masterful use of perspective point to individuals who underwent extensive training. They were the specialists of their time, likely held in high esteem within their communities. Their role may have been deeply intertwined with shamanic or spiritual traditions, acting as bridges between the everyday world and the powerful, symbolic realm depicted on the cave walls. The very act of creation was probably a sacred ritual in itself. Evidence for this is written in the most personal of signatures, the hand stencils found in caves from Indonesia to Spain. These are not random prints. Analysis reveals a startling fact. Both adults and children participated, their small hands placed alongside those of their elders. This was a communal act, a passing of tradition from one generation to the next right there in the flickering light. Some of these stencils show hands with missing fingers. For years, this was interpreted as evidence of ritual amputation or severe frostbite. Another compelling theory suggests these are not physical injuries at all, but a form of symbolic communication, a prehistoric sign language or accounting system used in ceremony. The artists did not just work at eye level. In many chambers, the most magnificent paintings are high on the walls and ceilings, far out of reach from the floor. This required the construction of sophisticated scaffolding. We know this because researchers have found holes drilled into the cave walls at Lascaux, holes that once held wooden supports for platforms that allowed the artists to work for hours, suspended in the dark. Their tools were as specialized as their skills. The precision of the lines, from the finest hairs on a horse's mane to the broad shading on a bison's hump, suggests the use of brushes. These were likely made from animal fur, perhaps from a horse's tail or a squirrel's pelt, chewed at the end to create flexible, durable bristles. They also used pads of moss or fur to dab on color, and even blew paint through hollow bones to create airbrush-like effects for hand stencils. The ultimate testament to their adaptability lies deep underwater. At Cosca Cave in France, accessed today only by divers through a submerged entrance, the art on the walls tells a story of a different world. These paintings were created when sea levels were over 100 meters lower during the last ice age. The artists worked in a cavern that opened onto a grassy plain, a landscape now drowned by the Mediterranean. They adapted to their changing environment, leaving their mark in a place that would one day be claimed by the sea. This raises a profound question. What complex social structures were needed to support these specialized creators? Their community had to provide for them, to value their work enough to supply them with precious pigments from distant lands, and to help them build scaffolds in the dark. The knowledge of how to mix paint, how to prepare a wall, and the sacred stories to be told, all of this had to be transmitted with meticulous care across generations without a single written word. How many master artists took on young apprentices, guiding their hands not with written instructions, but through the shared experience of torchlight and the smell of earth and ochre? The very same pigments that traveled across continents now face a new journey, one into the digital realm. As the physical caves grow more fragile, threatened by the very breath and presence of modern visitors, a fourth technology ensures their stories are not lost. Three-dimensional laser scanning builds perfect digital twins of these underground sanctuaries. It works by projecting a grid of laser light across every surface, from the grandest gallery to the tiniest crack. Sensors measure the exact time it takes for each beam of light to return, building a point cloud of millions, even billions, of individual data points. This cloud is then stitched together into a millimeter-perfect three-dimensional model, a frozen digital moment of the entire cave system. This is far more than a simple photograph. It is a full-scale, navigable replica that preserves not just the art, but its profound relationship to the space around it. The most immediate benefit is preservation. With caves like Lascaux now closed to the public to prevent further damage from mold and carbon dioxide, these scans become the primary record. They allow researchers to take measurements and study compositions from anywhere in the world without ever disturbing the delicate originals. More than that, they form the backbone of breathtaking virtual reality reconstructions and physical replicas, letting the public walk through these sacred spaces as they were meant to be experienced, not through a photograph but as a place. The true power of this technology, however, lies in the new questions it allows us to ask. By analyzing the precise placement of art within the three-dimensional model of El Castillo cave in Spain, researchers made a remarkable discovery. The paintings were not randomly distributed. They were concentrated in areas with the strongest acoustics, in chambers where a single voice or the beat of a drum would resonate with profound power. This suggests that the art was not a silent gallery. It was part of a multisensory ritual where the images on the wall were brought to life by sound and echo, a full-body experience in the flickering dark. In other parts of the world, laser scanning reveals different kinds of intention. At Gua Tambun in Malaysia, high-resolution scans of a seemingly chaotic rock panel uncovered a hidden narrative. Faint engravings, invisible to the naked eye from most angles, resolved into clear sequences of human figures and animals when viewed from one specific spot. The entire story was composed to be seen from a single, deliberate vantage point, as if the artist was directing the viewer's gaze in a prehistoric form of cinema. This makes you wonder what other stories are locked in the geometry of the rock, waiting for the perfect digital perspective to unlock them. As virtual reality technology advances, we will not just see these caves. We will be able to stand within them, to hear the simulated echoes in the chambers where they were painted, and to see the art by the light of a virtual torch. How will experiencing these spaces in their full, immersive scale change our understanding of the ceremonies that took place there? The caves that remember are now giving up their memories to a new kind of vault, one made of light and data, ensuring their stories can echo forever. The art was not meant to be seen in silence. The placement of these ancient masterpieces was a deliberate choice, guided as much by the ear as by the eye. This field of study is known as acoustic archaeology, and it reveals that our ancestors selected their sacred spaces for the way they transformed sound. A researcher named Igor Riznikov walked through the decorated caves of France, not just looking but listening. He hummed and chanted, mapping the echoes. His discovery was stunning. The areas with the most paintings and engravings, the most concentrated galleries of animals and symbols, were consistently the chambers with the richest, most resonant acoustics. In the deep passages of Niox Cave in France, a single voice is amplified into a chorus. A spoken word lingers in the air, and a drumbeat reverberates through the stone, creating a powerful, enveloping auditory experience. This was not a coincidence, it was a design principle. Experimental archaeologists have tried to recreate the soundscape of these rituals. They have crafted replicas of Paleolithic instruments, like flutes made from bird bone and lithophones, which are simply resonant rocks struck like gongs. In the acoustic hotspots of the caves, these instruments produce haunting, ethereal tones that seem to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The sound vibrates in your chest as much as it reaches your ears. This multi-sensory experience reaches its peak in places like the Hal Saflieni Hypogeum on Malta. This underground burial complex contains a chamber famously called the Oracle Room. Here, a low voice spoken into a small niche creates echoes that appear to emanate from the walls themselves, a disembodied voice rising from the stone. For a community gathered in the flickering torchlight, watching painted animals seemed to move in the shadows while a shaman's voice echoed as if from the spirit world. The line between the physical and the cosmological would have blurred entirely. The cave became a portal. Can you hear it? The chant, the drum, the breath of the community all merging with the echo from the rock, a collective vibration that connected them not just to each other, but to the very memory of the earth. What stories did they tell in that resonant dark, and what gods or ancestors did they believe were answering back? Beneath the magnificent art on the walls lies another story, written in the dust. While we look up at the painted bison and handprints, a fifth technique is looking down, reading the cave floor itself. This is microstratigraphy, the science of analyzing microscopic layers of deposits to reconstruct the complete history of human life in a cave. Think of it as reading tree rings, but for the ground beneath your feet. Scientists take tiny, intact core samples from the cave floor, cylinders of earth that hold a compressed timeline of everything that ever happened there. Each paper-thin layer is a separate page in a diary of daily life, preserved in stunning detail over tens of thousands of years. These micro-layers contain minuscule fragments of charcoal from ancient fires, telling us not just when a fire was lit, but what kind of wood was burned. They hold pollen grains carried in on the fur of animals or the feet of people, revealing which plants grew outside and what seasons the cave was occupied. They capture micro-fragments of flint tools, broken needles and beads, evidence of crafting and repair. Most remarkably, they can even preserve ancient DNA from the people and animals who lived there, a ghostly genetic signature of their presence. At El Morón Cave in Spain, microstratigraphy unveiled a breathtaking narrative of human resilience. The core samples showed alternating bands of intense occupation and long periods of abandonment, a story spanning 40,000 years. One of the most striking periods was the last glacial maximum, a time when ice sheets covered much of Europe. The layers from this era are thick with evidence of continuous, intensive use. People were huddling in this shelter against the brutal cold, and the floor remembers their struggle. The analysis of combustion features, the remains of their fires, shows a clear evolution in technology. The earliest layers contain simple, open hearths, but over time these give way to more complex structures, carefully lined with stones to control heat, and even early oven-like constructions for more efficient cooking and heating. This is not just a story of survival. It is a story of innovation in the face of adversity, written in the microscopic ash. In South Africa's Sibudu Cave, this microscopic gaze revealed an even more intimate detail. Researchers identified the remains of bedding, layers of plants that prehistoric people laid down to create comfortable sleeping areas. But these were not just any leaves. Analysis showed they were specifically chosen from plants known to have medicinal and insect-repellent properties. These early humans were not just sleeping on the ground. They were engineering their living space for comfort and health, creating a clean, pest-free home deep within the rock. What other intimate details of their domestic life are preserved in that dust? What stories of a child's first steps, of meals shared, of sickness and recovery, are waiting in those microscopic layers, the ultimate record of the lives lived in the dark, under the watchful eyes of their own art on the walls? These recurring patterns are the silent grammar of the Paleolithic world. Scattered among the breathtaking animals, a different kind of message covers the walls. Dots, lines, triangles, and zigzags form a library of abstract signs, a system of symbols that may be one of humanity's first steps toward written language. While the bison and mammoths capture our immediate attention, it is these geometric forms that hold a deeper, more complex secret. Researcher Genevieve von Petzinger undertook a monumental task, cataloging every non-figurative sign found in European caves spanning a period of over 30,000 years. Her astonishing conclusion was that our ancestors were not just drawing random marks, they were using a shared visual vocabulary of 32 distinct signs, a symbolic tradition that remained consistent across vast distances and through hundreds of generations. This was not isolated doodling, it was a system. Look at the hand stencils in Ling Tedong, Indonesia. They are not alone. Each one is framed by unique, patterned markings, a kind of signature or code that may have identified a specific clan or conveyed a particular spiritual status. The person who placed their hand on that wall was making a statement that went far beyond "I was here." They were declaring who they were and perhaps what they believed. This idea of a widespread symbolic language becomes even more compelling with the aviform sign. This abstract shape, resembling a bird in flight, appears in caves separated by hundreds of kilometers. For a symbol to appear in such distant locations, the concept it represented must have been transmitted through cultural contact. It suggests that groups who may never have met directly were part of a shared intellectual network, a continent-spanning conversation etched in stone. Could these signs be a proto-script without a Rosetta Stone to translate them? We may never know their exact meaning, but their consistent use hints at a powerful possibility. They might have recorded myths, the great stories that defined a people. They could have tracked genealogies, noting family lines and ancestral ties. Or perhaps they encoded spiritual knowledge, a sacred shorthand for concepts too powerful for ordinary words. What stories would we hear if we could read the dots and lines that surround a charging bison? The art was never just a picture. It was a caption, a label, an entire narrative waiting for someone who knew the code. These symbolic codes and painted narratives were not created in a void. They were born from a specific world, a living landscape that shaped every story the artists chose to tell. We can now reconstruct that lost environment with astonishing precision by reading the cave itself. Speleothems, the magnificent stalagmites and stalactites that grow in silent chambers, are more than beautiful formations. They are stone climate archives. Each microscopic growth layer, laid down over centuries, contains a chemical record of the temperature and rainfall patterns outside the cave at the time it formed. By analyzing the isotopes in these layers, scientists can chart the arrival of ice ages and the brief, warm interglacials that punctuated them. This data provides the backdrop against which the art was created. The very air the artists breathed is captured in these stone pillars. In Chauvet Cave, the stunningly detailed portraits of woolly rhinoceroses, mammoths, and other massive creatures correspond perfectly with the cold, dry phases identified in the local stalagmite records. The artists were not painting mythical beasts from a forgotten past. They were documenting the powerful, living realities of their own Ice Age world, the giants that shared their territory and dominated their imagination. The story continues on the cave floor, sealed in the sediments. Pollen grains, incredibly durable, are preserved there like tiny time capsules. A single core sample can reveal a complete botanical history, showing the transformation of a landscape from a dense, humid rainforest to an open, dry savanna. This precise shift was documented at Serra do Capivara in Brazil. The paintings there, depicting communal hunts and elaborate rituals, were created during a period of dramatic climate change. As the familiar forest receded and a new, more challenging environment emerged, the people turned to the cave walls. Their art may have been a way to assert their identity, to record traditional knowledge, and to seek spiritual strength in the face of an uncertain world. Alongside the pollen, the bones of animals tell us who else was home. The remains of prey species found in hearths show what people were eating, while the bones of predators like cave bears and lions, often found in deep, remote chambers, reveal which powerful competitors they shared the darkness with. This environmental pressure must have been immense. Living in a world stalked by giant cats and bears, in a climate that could shift from fertile to barren over a few generations, surely forged a profound connection to the forces of nature. What stories become urgent when your entire world is changing? The art in these caves is the answer. It is a direct response to the environment, a desperate and beautiful attempt to understand, to influence, and to remember the world as it was, even as it was transforming before their eyes. The human figures transforming into beasts on the cave walls are more than mythical creatures. They are potential portraits of a shaman in the midst of a spiritual metamorphosis. This shamanic interpretation suggests that these deep, dark chambers were not art galleries in any modern sense. They were portals deliberately sought out for their power to induce altered states of consciousness. In the absolute silence and sensory deprivation of the deep caves, the rhythmic beat of a drum or the steady chant of a chorus could guide a community healer into a profound trance. Their mind, freed from the constraints of the everyday, would journey into a spirit world, a realm where humans could communicate with animal guides and ancestral forces. The art they later painted was an attempt to map that invisible landscape, to bring back a record of their visions for all to see. The most famous example is the so-called Sorcerer of Les Trois-Frères cave in France. This enigmatic figure, carved and painted high in a remote chamber, stands upright on human legs but possesses the antlers of a stag, the ears of an owl, the tail of a horse, and the paws of a lion. He seems to be dancing, caught in the very act of transformation. This therianthrope, this blending of human and animal, is a powerful symbol of the shaman's perceived ability to cross the boundary between the human and natural worlds, to take on the power and knowledge of the beast. This idea is reinforced by the presence of abstract signs found in caves across the globe. Researchers note that many of the dots, zigzags, and nested curves that appear alongside the animals bear a striking resemblance to entoptic phenomena. These are the luminous geometric patterns and swirling forms that are generated within the human optic system itself, commonly experienced during migraines, trance states, or the ingestion of psychoactive substances. Their universal appearance in cave art strongly implies that the artists were depicting the very first things they saw on their inward journeys, the shared visual language of the altered human brain. The evidence for this spiritual technology is not merely symbolic. At Chauvet, a Northern California cave site, mortar holes grinding into the cave floor itself were found to contain microscopic residues of psychoactive plants. The act of preparing and consuming these substances was intrinsically linked to the sacred space. Meanwhile, the rock art of the San people in South Africa provides a direct ethnographic link. Their paintings explicitly depict shamans in the act of transformation, often bleeding from the nose as they enter a trance state to heal the sick or influence the weather, a clear illustration of a living tradition that stretches back thousands of years. Can you feel the weight of that purpose in the dark? A community gathered, their hopes resting on one individual who would journey where they could not, to bargain with the spirits of the hunt or plead with the forces of nature. The painted bison was not just a picture of food. It was a spiritual entity, its image on the wall a point of contact with its very essence. How many prayers for survival were whispered into the stone, echoing in the chambers where those powerful animal spirits were believed to reside? The smallest marks can reveal the most intimate details of a lost craft. Use where analysis turns the microscopic world into a window, letting us watch ancient artists at work through the subtle damage left on their tools. When a stone flake scrapes against an animal hide thousands of times, it develops a unique pattern of tiny scars and a characteristic polish. A tool used for carving limestone will bear a different set of minuscule fractures and abrasions than one used for whittling wood or cutting reeds. By placing these artifacts under high-powered microscopes, archaeologists can read these signatures like a manual, reconstructing the exact tasks performed in the flickering torchlight. This is how we know that a specific reindeer antler fragment found in a French cave was not a ritual object but a smooth, hard polisher for softening leather. It is how we can distinguish a blade used for butchering a kill from one reserved for the delicate work of preparing pigments. The tools themselves confess their life's purpose. This forensic approach extends to the very instruments of creation. Some of the most elegant bone tools discovered in caves, once catalogued as decorative pins or ceremonial items, show under magnification a distinct polish and rounding on their tips. This is the unmistakable signature of repeated contact with a gritty paste. These were paint applicators used to carefully spread mixtures of ochre and animal fat across the rough cave walls. The artist's brush, worn down by countless strokes, now tells us how the paint was laid on, thick and deliberate. At Enline Cave in France, this microscopic gaze transformed our understanding of daily life. Ornate bones, beautifully engraved with geometric patterns, were found to have been practical awls and smoothers for hideworking. Their beauty did not separate them from utility, it enhanced it. The same hand that could incise a perfect line on a tool could also scrape a hide to buttery softness. This blurs the line between the sacred and the mundane, suggesting that the act of creation infused every aspect of their survival. Even the lamps that lit this great work have stories etched in carbon and silica. Analysis of the blackened residues on limestone lamps and the microscopic remains of wicks reveals a sophisticated understanding of fuel and flame. They preferentially selected mosses or juniper wood, materials that burned with a clean, bright light and produced minimal soot. This was a critical consideration when working for hours in a sealed, underground environment. They were not just making light, they were engineering an atmosphere, controlling their workspace to protect their lungs and their masterpiece in progress from a haze of black smoke. So how does this change our vision of the artist? It grounds them. We see them not as mystical figures who conjured art from nothing, but as skilled tradespeople. They were leatherworkers who knew how to prepare a surface, chemists who mixed durable paints, and engineers who designed efficient lighting. They selected the right tool for the right job from a kit that was both practical and precious. Understanding the physical process of grinding pigment, loading a bone brush, and positioning a lamp to illuminate a ceiling fresco makes their achievement even more staggering. It was a marathon of physical labor, performed in difficult conditions, all in the service of a vision that would outlast them by thousands of years. What does it mean that their most mundane tools, the scrapers and the awls, now speak as eloquently as their most magnificent art? Those tiny footprints pressed into the clay of Tukdordabat Cave tell a profound story. They were made by a child, perhaps only 3 years old, walking alongside adults deep into the mountain's heart. This was not a place for casual play. The journey was long, dark, and difficult, yet the child was there, a participant in a ceremony at the very chamber where majestic clay bison were sculpted. This intimate evidence transforms our understanding of these spaces. They were not exclusive sanctuaries for a secretive elite. They were family spaces where the entire community, down to its youngest members, gathered for rituals that defined their cultural identity. The children were not merely observers. In many caves, we find their direct contributions to the walls themselves. Look up at the soft, clay-covered ceilings of places like Rouffignac Cave in France. Here, thousands of lines, known as finger flutings, weave across the stone. These are not random scratches. Their specific height and spacing reveal they were made by the small, deliberate hands of children, sometimes lifted up to reach a pristine surface. They were being encouraged to touch, to feel, and to leave their own mark on a sacred canvas. This was a form of guided practice, a way of learning the feel of the rock and the motion of creation under the watchful eyes of their elders. The evidence of this intergenerational teaching is even more vivid in the Cave of the Horses in Spain. Here, a panel of hand stencils is dominated by small, child-sized prints clustered tightly together. This grouping feels intentional, less like individual signatures and more like a collective event, perhaps an initiation where a group of children placed their hands on the wall as part of a rite of passage. They were not just learning how to paint, they were learning who they were and to which community they belonged. The lessons continued on the cave floor. In several sites, we find hardened clay impressions of animal figurines, like the famous clay bison of Tuc-Dordabat. Surrounding these sacred models are the small fingerprints of children, evidence that they handled and played with these figures. Think of this not as idle distraction, but as an interactive classroom. A child holds a clay horse, and as their fingers trace its form, an elder tells the story of the great hunt, the spirit of the horse, and its importance to their people. The mythology was not just told, it was felt and embodied through play. This changes everything about the social importance of these rituals. The transmission of knowledge was not a separate, formal process. It was woven into the very fabric of their most sacred activities. By bringing children into the deep dark, the community was ensuring its survival. They were passing down not just technical skills for mixing paint, but the core stories, values, and spiritual beliefs that held their world together. The child making finger flutings on the ceiling was learning the same motions used for adult art. The child holding the clay bison was internalizing a story that would one day be their responsibility to tell. How many of our own most enduring memories come from childhood experiences that felt like adventure, but were in fact our first, most formative lessons? In the flickering torchlight, surrounded by the powerful images of their world, these children were being woven into the story itself, their small hands ensuring the memory of their people would never be forgotten. The genetic ghosts of the deep past are no longer confined to bones. A revolutionary eighth technique now allows us to identify the very presence of ancient beings from the dirt they walked upon. Scientists can extract and sequence minuscule fragments of DNA preserved in cave sediments, reading the genetic signature of every human and animal that lived, died, or simply passed through a chamber, even when not a single skeleton remains. This environmental DNA acts as an invisible guestbook, recording occupants across millennia. The power of this method was proven spectacularly at Denisova Cave in Siberia. For years, the only physical evidence of the mysterious Denisovan hominins were a few tiny bone fragments. But by analyzing the cave floor itself, researchers confirmed the long-term presence of both Neanderthals and Denisovans, painting a picture of a shared refuge used by different branches of the human family tree. The same approach in Spanish caves has successfully detected the genetic traces of early modern humans, mapping their arrival into territories once dominated by their ancient cousins. This genetic lens can even solve artistic mysteries. On the walls of Chauvet, cave bears are depicted with powerful, startling realism. While bones of these massive creatures were found in the cave, they were surprisingly scarce, leaving a question about how central they were to the human experience there. Sediment DNA analysis provided the definitive answer. The ground was saturated with cave bear genetic material, confirming that these giants were frequent, formidable residents. their presence so imposing it inspired the artists to capture their essence for eternity. This technique continually pushes back the boundaries of our knowledge. At American Falls Cave in Idaho, scientists sifted through layers of sediment and found human DNA dating back 16,000 years. This was a stunning discovery, placing people in North America earlier than the established timeline suggested by traditional archaeological evidence. The very Earth, once considered mere background, is now a primary source telling us who was there and when. What lost chapters of human migration and interaction might we finally reconstruct from these genetic whispers? The story of our past is written not only on the walls but in the dust at our feet. The animals on the cave walls were never just food. Their selection reveals a deep symbolic language, a deliberate choice that connects the physical world to a spiritual one. In the great galleries of Europe, you see a recurring cast of powerful creatures. Horses, bison, and the massive, now extinct aurochs dominate the art, while animals that were likely common in their daily diet, like reindeer, appear far less frequently. This was not a simple menu of available prey, it was a pantheon. One compelling theory is that these animals served as clan totems, spiritual emblems for specific family groups. A person might have identified not just as a member of a tribe, but as a child of the bison or the horse, their identity and lineage tied to the spirit of a specific beast. These images could also have been spiritual guides, entities invoked for protection or wisdom on a hunt or a journey. Or perhaps they were part of a sympathetic magic ritual where painting a successful hunt was believed to help cause one in reality, a way to influence the uncertain outcome of the chase through spiritual means. Look at the famous panel of the swimming stags at Las Coques. Their heads are raised, their antlers elegant, and their legs extended as if gliding through water. This is not a hunting scene. It may depict a seasonal migration, a critical event in the annual cycle, or even a creation story about the first animals emerging from a primordial water. The image tells a story far beyond the need for meat. This pattern of symbolic selection repeats across the globe. At the site of Chauvet in Saudi Arabia, the rock art documents a profound cultural shift. Early layers show wild camels hunted with spears. Later, the depictions change. The camels are shown with harnesses and tethers, their images marking the revolutionary moment of their domestication. The art chronicled a new relationship, not just with an animal, but with the entire landscape and their place within it. Some of the most haunting images are of predators. Cave lions, immense and powerful, are often painted without mouths. Why omit the most fearsome part of such a creature? It may have been a form of spiritual control. By rendering the lion mute, the artist could symbolically neutralize its threat, depicting a powerful but appeased spirit that no longer needed to roar or bite. These silent lions could represent dangerous forces of nature that required ritual respect and pacification. So how did this all fit together? The animal representations were likely the centerpiece of a complex belief system that wove together the practical needs of hunting, the social bonds of kinship, and a vast cosmological understanding. To hunt a bison was a physical act, but to paint one, to know its spirit, and to call upon it as an ancestor, that was a spiritual one. The cave was the place where these threads met, where the clan, the hunt, and the cosmos were all connected on a single, sacred wall. What prayers were whispered to the painted horse, and what promises were made to the mouthless lion, in the hope of maintaining balance in a dangerous and beautiful world? The artistic hand of a culture leaves a unique signature in every line and curve. Stylistic analysis, our ninth technique, deciphers these signatures, comparing the conventions of ancient art across vast distances and time to trace the invisible threads of cultural connection. It is not just about what our ancestors painted, but how they painted it that reveals their world. The proportions they favored, the perspectives they chose, and the very techniques they mastered form a visual language that can be read to understand how ideas traveled. In the deep caves of Europe, this analysis reveals a clear evolution. The earliest works are often simple, powerful outlines, silhouettes of animals captured in a single, fluid line. But over thousands of years, a revolution in technique occurred. Artists began to master polychrome painting, using multiple colors to create stunning effects of volume and movement. They learned to exploit the natural contours of the cave wall, making a bison's shoulder swell from the rock itself. They employed shading and perspective, creating the illusion that a herd of horses was galloping deep into the stone. This was not a random improvement. It was a slow, cumulative refinement of skill, a tradition of knowledge being carefully passed down and enhanced across hundreds of generations. The story becomes even more compelling when we look across continents. Consider the graceful Guion figures from the Kimberley region of Australia. These long, elegant human forms, often shown holding elaborate objects, bear a startling resemblance to the round-head paintings of the Sahara Desert. Separated by an entire ocean, these two artistic traditions share a similar approach to the human form, a comparable use of dynamic poses, and a parallel symbolic complexity. This does not necessarily mean direct contact. Instead, it suggests that ancient populations, as they migrated across the globe, carried with them a shared artistic heritage, a foundational way of seeing and representing the human story that expressed itself in similar ways in wildly different environments. The connections can be startlingly precise. At the Jinsha site in China, archaeologists uncovered exquisite jade artifacts carved with intricate motifs, including a repeating cloud and thunder pattern. This same distinctive pattern was found hundreds of kilometers away, painted on the walls of a cave. The material was different, but the artistic language was identical. This is undeniable evidence of a widespread cultural sphere, a network of shared beliefs and symbolic communication that linked distant communities. They were not isolated tribes. They were participants in a vast, continent-spanning conversation, with art as their common tongue. What lost maps of human interaction could we draw if we could chart every shared motif and technical flourish? How many other forgotten networks of influence and kinship are waiting to be discovered, not in stone tools or pottery, but in the graceful curve of a painted line? These artistic signatures reveal communities that saw the entire world as a sacred canvas. A single decorated cave was rarely an isolated temple. Instead, it often served as one vital node within a vast ritual landscape, a network of spiritually charged places that structured the very rhythm of life across entire regions. The concept transforms our understanding from isolated sanctuaries to integrated sacred geographies, connecting underground art with open-air sites, burial grounds, and distant quarries in a single, meaningful system. Consider the Coa Valley in Portugal. Here, thousands of animal figures are not hidden in the dark but are engraved on open-air schist cliffs, creating a monumental outdoor gallery that stretches for miles along the river. This vast ensemble of art, visible under the sun and stars, was clearly meant to be experienced as part of the living landscape, its imagery complementing and connecting with the symbols found in the region's deeper caves. The art was not confined to a single type of space. It flowed from the hidden depths to the sunlit valleys, marking the entire territory as spiritually significant. The placement of these sites was profoundly practical and symbolic. In the French Pyrenees, researchers have noted that the locations of major decorated caves correspond almost perfectly with the seasonal migration routes of the animals they depict. A cave like Niox might have been a ceremonial waypoint, a place where communities gathered at specific times of the year to conduct rituals that aligned with the movement of the herds they depended upon. Their spiritual calendar was mapped directly onto the ecological and geographical one, turning an annual journey into a pilgrimage. This integration of architecture and belief reaches a stunning scale at sites like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. Here, around 12,000 years ago, people constructed massive stone circles on a hilltop, each pillar carved with elaborate animals, but the ritual landscape did not stop at the surface. Beneath these monumental T-shaped pillars, they also carved out sophisticated underground structures, silo-like chambers and connecting tunnels. This created a comprehensive ritual complex where ceremonies likely moved between the soaring grandeur of the hilltop and the intimate, womb-like darkness below, physically enacting a connection between different realms of their cosmology. How did this interconnected geography shape a society? It would have structured seasonal movements, drawing scattered groups together at predetermined times and places for massive social gatherings. It would have reinforced shared cosmological beliefs, as the same symbols seen in a deep cave were also encountered at a mountain pass or a riverside quarry. The landscape itself became a mnemonic device, a giant, walkable storybook where every hill, spring, and cliff face held meaning. To live within this geography was to be constantly reminded of your place in a story much larger than yourself, a story written not on pages but on the very skin of the earth. Recreating the tools of the deep past transforms abstract theory into tangible experience. This is the power of experimental archaeology, a 10th technique where researchers become artists, grinding pigments and working by the dim light of animal fat lamps to understand the practical challenges faced in the caves. By physically replicating the methods, we gain a profound appreciation for the considerable technical knowledge these ancient masters possessed. Consider the iconic hand stencils found across the globe. The researcher Mitchell Laurblanche demonstrated how these perfect negative images were achieved not with a simple splash, but with a sophisticated airbrush technique. By blowing a mixture of powdered ochre and water through a hollow bone held just inches from the wall, he created crisp, sharp outlines around his own hand. This was not a crude spatter. It required control over breath, consistency of the pigment, and a steady hand to achieve that signature clarity. The tools for painting were equally refined. Experiments show that a simple twig, chewed at one end to separate the fibers, creates a surprisingly effective and durable brush, capable of producing everything from hair-thin lines to broad washes of color. The very act of chewing the wood may have activated natural tannins, stiffening the bristles and creating a more versatile tool. The lighting that made it all possible was a feat of engineering in itself. Using replica lamps based on archaeological finds, researchers have burned various animal fats. A mere 50 grams of fat, about the size of a small egg, can provide a clear, steady flame for several hours, casting enough light for detailed work on a ceiling fresco. The choice of wick material was critical. Moss or certain plant fibers burn with a brighter, cleaner light than others, showing a deep understanding of how to manage smoke and maximize illumination in a confined space. The preparation of the paint itself was a science. Grinding a lump of raw ochre between two specific types of sandstone produces a powder of exceptional fineness and consistency. The choice of binder transformed this powder. Mixing it with plain water creates a thin, watery paint suitable for spraying. But adding a binder like animal fat or egg white creates a thicker, more adhesive paste that grips the rock, allowing for bold, opaque applications that could withstand the test of millennia. Each of these steps reveals a chain of deliberate, optimized choices. This was not random experimentation. It was a transmitted body of knowledge, a recipe for creation that had been perfected over generations. What does this hands-on process tell us about prehistoric cognition? It reveals a mind capable of complex problem-solving, of observing the properties of natural materials and systematically testing their interactions. They were not just artists, they were chemists, engineers, and physicists working in the flickering dark to leave a message for the future. When you hold a chewed brush or blow pigment through a bone, you are not just replicating an action. You are connecting with a moment of profound human ingenuity, a moment where a problem was identified and an elegant solution was found. How many failed experiments and perfected techniques are encoded in the simple, stunning beauty of a hand stencil on a cave wall? The purpose behind these underground masterpieces remains one of history's most captivating puzzles. For a long time, scholars championed a simple idea of art for art's sake, suggesting our ancestors painted from a pure, innate creative impulse. But the sheer difficulty and danger of working in total darkness, far from any living space, suggests a motivation far more profound than simple decoration. The modern view embraces a tapestry of overlapping reasons, each thread revealing a different facet of prehistoric life. One of the most enduring theories is that of hunting magic. According to this functional view, painting a spear piercing a bison was not a record of a past event, but a spiritual attempt to influence the future, to ensure the success of the next hunt through sympathetic magic. The animals depicted were often those most vital for survival, their images ritually targeted to guarantee a real-world outcome. Yet this theory cannot explain everything. Why are some of the most commonly eaten animals, like reindeer, rarely shown, and why paint deep in chambers no one lived in? This is where the shamanic ritual theory gains power. It proposes that these spaces were chosen specifically to induce altered states of consciousness. The sensory deprivation, the flickering torchlight, and the resonant acoustics could all help a shaman enter a trance, journeying to a spirit world where they communed with the forces represented by the animals. The art then becomes a map of that invisible cosmology, a record of visions seen in the dark. A completely different perspective is offered by the structuralist approach. This theory sees the entire cave not as a random collection of images, but as a deliberate symbolic landscape. The entrance might represent the world of the living, while the deepest, most difficult to reach chambers could symbolize the underworld or the realm of powerful spirits. The paintings in each zone and the journey between them would then enact a spiritual narrative, a walk through a believed-in universe. Meanwhile, other caves show evidence of more social functions. At Bambata Cave in Zimbabwe, the artwork coincides with evidence of large seasonal gatherings. Here, the paintings may have served as territorial markers for different clans, or as a focal point for ceremonies that strengthened social bonds during annual meetings for trade, alliance building, and arranging marriages. The cave was a multifunctional space, a convention center, a temple, and a living archive all at once. So, which theory is correct? The most compelling answer is that they all are. A single cave could have served a dozen different purposes across generations. One chamber might have been used for an initiation ceremony, where adolescents proved their courage in the dark. Another alcove could have been a shaman's private sanctuary for connecting with animal guides. A main gallery might have been the site for communal rituals before a great hunt, while the same walls also stored vital information about seasonal cycles or clan genealogies through abstract symbols. The true purpose of cave art was as layered and complex as the human mind itself. It was not one thing, but everything, a sacred Swiss Army knife for the human spirit, addressing our deepest needs for meaning, community, and control in a vast and unpredictable world. Living cultures hold keys to the silent galleries of the past. An 11th technique, comparative ethnography, carefully bridges this vast chronological gap by drawing insights from the spiritual and artistic practices of contemporary traditional societies. These living traditions offer powerful analogies for interpreting the possible meanings behind the hand stencils and animal forms left by our distant ancestors. Among the San people of southern Africa, the connection is remarkably direct. Modern San artists have explicitly described their rock paintings as records of spiritual journeys, visions seen during trance dances where healers enter an altered state to cure illness or influence the weather. The zigzags, dots, and floating figures common in their art are not abstract decorations. They are depictions of the physical sensations of trance, the feeling of a potency rising up the spine, or the transformation into a part animal, part spirit being. This provides a stunningly clear framework for understanding similar motifs in European caves, suggesting that what we see might not be literal scenes, but maps of non-ordinary states of consciousness. On another continent, Aboriginal Australian elders explain that their ancestral cave paintings are far more than spiritual art. They are title deeds, legal documents etched in ochre that record a clan's deep, unbroken connection to a specific tract of land. A series of concentric circles might mark a sacred waterhole, while a particular animal species painted in a shelter confirms the group's responsibility as its custodians. The act of repainting these images, a tradition carried on for generations, is not just restoration. It is a reaffirmation of ownership and a recitation of the creation stories or dreaming that bind the people to that place. This perspective transforms a cave wall from a simple canvas into a library of lore, genealogy, and ecology. Meanwhile, the Ojibwe Midwiwin scrolls, made of birch bark, demonstrate how a system of abstract symbols can encode entire mythic cycles. A single, complex scroll is a narrative map guiding an initiate through layers of spiritual knowledge, origin stories, and healing rituals. This shows that non-literal signs, like those found in Paleolithic caves, have the capacity to hold vast amounts of structured information, potentially recording everything from clan histories to astronomical knowledge. Yet this approach demands profound respect. We cannot simply paste San beliefs onto French caves or assume Aboriginal land practices explain Indonesian hand stencils. Each prehistoric tradition was unique, born from its own environment and cultural evolution. The power of comparative ethnography is not in providing definitive answers, but in expanding our imagination. It offers a vocabulary of possibilities, showing us the kinds of meanings that art can hold in a non-literate society deeply connected to the spirit of place. How do we listen to these living voices without drowning out the unique, silent song of each ancient cave? The light that brought these masterpieces to life was a carefully managed technology. Far from the cave entrance in absolute darkness, the Paleolithic artist relied on portable lamps, often simple stone bowls carved to hold a precious fuel. These were filled with animal fat, likely from horses or reindeer, which provided a clean, steady burn. A wick made of moss or lichen would float in the fat, its gentle flame casting a warm, mobile glow that could illuminate a small section of wall for hours on end. This was not a frantic dash into the dark. It was a deliberate, sustained effort made possible by a reliable and portable source of light. For broader, brighter illumination, they used torches made from resin-rich woods like pine. These spluttered and crackled, throwing dynamic shadows across the cavern walls, but they came with a cost. Their smoky breath left behind a permanent record in the form of soot marks on the ceiling, black signatures that modern scientists now use to help date the art panels below. The control of this light was itself an art. In La Grotte d'Oulen in France, archaeologists found flat, pale limestone slabs deliberately placed on the cave floor. Experiments revealed that these acted as primitive reflectors. By positioning a fat burning lamp on one of these light-colored surfaces, the artist could effectively double the illumination on the wall they were working on, a simple yet brilliant solution to the challenge of painting in the deep dark. But the true magic of this firelight was in its movement. In the flickering, unstable glow of a torch or lamp, the painted animals would have seemed to come alive. The shadow of a carved bison would pulse and shift. The line of a running horse would appear to stretch its legs. This was not a static gallery under museum lights. It was a dynamic, immersive experience where the art breathed and moved, its magical quality magnified by the very medium used to view it. How did this influence the artist's hand? They may have chosen to paint in certain areas precisely because of how the rock contours caught the moving light, creating the illusion of depth and motion. The entire ritual experience of the cave, the chanting, the echoes, and the dancing fire, was designed to blur the line between the painted image and the living spirit it represented. In that shifting light, the stone itself seemed to remember not just the form of the animal, but its very breath and life. The very ground plan of a cave can be read like a map of the ancient mind. Spatial analysis, a technique that digitally plots the precise location of every mark and artifact, reveals that these underground worlds were carefully organized, their chambers assigned distinct purposes that guided movement and ritual. By creating a three-dimensional inventory of the entire space, researchers can identify clear activity zones, transforming a hollow in the earth into a blueprint of prehistoric life. In the entrance areas of many caves, the evidence points to the mundane and the practical. Here, archaeologists often find the remains of hearths, scattered stone tools, and food debris. This was the living room, the workshop, the space for daily life illuminated by daylight. But as you journey deeper, crossing an invisible threshold, the character of the cave changes dramatically. The art begins, and its nature intensifies the further in you go. The most magnificent and spiritually charged imagery is consistently found in the most remote and difficult-to-reach chambers, far from the inhabited entrance. At Les Trois-Frères in France, the famous sorcerer figure is not in an easy-to-find gallery. He is located in a final, hard-to-access chamber, a journey that requires crawling and climbing. This was not a public space. Its inaccessibility suggests it was a restricted sanctuary, perhaps reserved for initiations or for a shaman's most profound spiritual work. The placement of the art itself becomes a form of access control, separating the everyday from the sacred. Hand stencils often serve as powerful markers of these transitions. They are frequently clustered at the mouths of passages or at the entry points to significant chambers, as if physically stamping a human presence onto a boundary between worlds. A person moving through the cave would pass under a canopy of these ghostly hands, a silent but potent reminder that they were leaving one kind of space and entering another. This distribution hints at a choreography of ceremony, a prescribed path that participants would follow. The journey inward might have represented a descent into the underworld or an approach to the realm of the spirits. The act of moving from a chamber decorated with common animals to one holding a powerful therianthrope like the sorcerer would have been a profound narrative and emotional experience, built step by step into the very architecture of the cave. So what social rules governed who could walk which path? The spatial organization suggests a society with complex hierarchies of knowledge and spiritual authority. While the entire community may have gathered in the larger, more accessible chambers for communal rituals, the deepest sanctuaries were likely the domain of a select few. The cave itself enforced these rules, its physical challenges acting as a barrier that only the prepared or the permitted could cross. Understanding this geography allows us to reconstruct not just what they believed, but how they practiced those beliefs in a living, breathing, and spatially defined sacred landscape. How did it feel to be a child holding an elder's hand, walking from the familiar firelight of the entrance into the echoing dark, passing under the hands of ancestors, moving toward a mystery painted on the walls deep within the earth? The ground beneath their feet was a map of distant places. When an ancient artist prepared their pigments in the flickering torchlight, they were not just mixing paint. They were blending together journeys. The materials they used tell a silent story of vast social networks that stretched across hundreds of kilometers, connecting communities who may never have even met. The presence of non-local substances in a deep, dark cave is one of the most compelling clues we have to the symbolic world of our ancestors. It reveals that the value of an object was not just in its utility, but in its origin. A shell from the warm Mediterranean Sea, carefully perforated and hung as a pendant, has been found in the cold, inland caves of central France. For the person who wore it, this was more than a piece of jewelry. It was a piece of a story, a tangible connection to a distant coast and the people who lived there. In the opposite direction, amber from the chilly Baltic Sea traveled all the way to the sun-drenched caves of the Mediterranean. This was not a simple economic transaction. These materials carried a powerful magic, a significance born from the epic distance they had crossed. The true nature of this ancient exchange is beautifully illustrated at Cueva de los Avians in Spain. Here, archaeologists uncovered a collection of perforated shells, but these were not empty. They were ancient paint pots, still holding residues of vibrant red and yellow pigments. Analysis showed that while some shells were collected from local beaches, others had originated from coastlines much further away. Why would someone go to the immense effort of carrying heavy, fragile shells over such difficult terrain when perfectly good local ones were available? The answer lies in the power of the story. A shell from a faraway shore was not just a container, it was a relic. Its very presence spoke of long voyages, of alliances with distant groups, and of access to knowledge and resources that others did not have. The pigment inside was likely just as storied. We know from other sites that the specific red ochre used in cave paintings was often mined from quarries located far from the cave itself. This was not about finding any red dirt. It was about acquiring the right red dirt, a substance that may have been believed to hold a specific spiritual potency because of where it came from. The act of obtaining it was a pilgrimage, and the material itself was a sacred relic long before it ever touched the cave wall. Can you picture the journey of a single lump of ochre? Mined from a sacred quarry by one group, it is traded to another in exchange for fine flint or exotic shells. It travels from hand to hand, across rivers and over mountains, each transfer reinforcing a social bond. Finally, it arrives in a deep cave where an artist grinds it into powder, mixing it with animal fat to create a paint that will tell a story meant to last for millennia. The story on the wall is about a bison, but the story in the paint is about connection. What complex web of relationships, trust, and shared belief was necessary to move a seashell from the coast to a mountain cave, or to bring a rare mineral from one end of a continent to the other? These material journeys suggest that the prehistoric world was far from a collection of isolated tribes. It was a world woven together by invisible threads of travel and trade, where the most valued possessions were those that carried the memory of a distant home. Digital reconstruction peels back millennia of geological change. These caves were not static museums when the artists worked within them. Entrances have collapsed, chambers have flooded, and silent waterfalls of stone have built new formations over the original art. Using precise three-dimensional scans as a foundation, specialists can digitally erase these later alterations. They can reconstruct collapsed ceilings, drain virtual floodwaters, and restore the original shape of a cave mouth, revealing the exact space as the Paleolithic artist first encountered it. The most dramatic example is Cosca Cave, its entrance now deep beneath the Mediterranean Sea. Its digital twin does more than show the submerged walls. It rebuilds the entire vanished landscape, raising the sea level by over 100 meters to reveal a grassy coastal plain that stretched for miles. The cave was not a seaside grotto but an inland shelter, a fact that completely transforms our understanding of the journeys people made to reach it and the world they depicted on its walls. Beyond the geography, these models can simulate the one element that brought the art to life: ancient light. Advanced rendering software calculates the physics of a single animal fat lamp, modeling its flickering, uneven glow across the specific contours of a reconstructed chamber. This is not a modern, sterile light. It is a dynamic, breathing light that makes shadows dance and painted figures seem to stir. How did this specific, unpredictable illumination influence where an artist chose to place a bison or a handprint? A figure might have been positioned so that the natural bulge of the rock, when hit by a torch's moving beam, gave the animal the illusion of breathing. A hidden niche might have been chosen precisely because it remained in shadow until a ritual participant stepped forward with a lamp, revealing a hidden image in a dramatic moment of discovery. Seeing the cave through this restored lens of fire and geography forces us to ask new questions. Was the difficult, dangerous journey to a deep chamber part of the ritual's power? Did the restored landscape outside the cave entrance, with its specific rivers and mountains, directly influence the animals chosen for the walls? Digital reconstruction does not just show us a restored cave. It offers us a chance to stand at the shoulder of the artist, to see the emerging masterpiece not as a finished relic, but as a living decision made in a specific place, at a specific moment, in a specific and magical light. The very breath of a modern visitor can become a threat to art that has survived for 30,000 years. This is the heartbreaking paradox of cave conservation. The Lascaux Cave in France is the most famous cautionary tale. After its discovery, it was opened to the public, and hundreds of thousands of people walked through its chambers. They brought with them a subtle but catastrophic change. Their bodies warmed the air, their exhalations raised the humidity and carbon dioxide levels. This new, human-made microclimate created the perfect conditions for algae, bacteria, and fungi to flourish across the walls. A white mold spread like a disease, and a green algae bloom stained the ancient stone, threatening to consume the very paintings that had drawn people there. The cave was sealed shut to the public in 1963, a desperate measure to save what remained. The same tragic story has repeated itself at Altamira and Chauvet. We learned that our admiration, in its most literal form, is destructive. The caves that remembered so well for so long began to forget under our gaze. In response, science has built a new kind of shield, one made of data and precision. Inside these fragile environments, networks of sensors now monitor the cave's vital signs with the vigilance of an intensive care unit. They track tiny fluctuations in temperature, measure the exact moisture content in the air, and count the parts per million of carbon dioxide. This data streams continuously to conservators, and automated systems can trigger alerts or even activate climate control mechanisms the moment conditions drift toward a danger zone. The goal is to maintain the perfect stillness the art requires, a stability that human presence inevitably shatters. But how do you share a treasure you must lock away? The answer lies in perfect copies, using the three-dimensional laser scans that document every crack and contour. teams of artists and engineers construct breathtakingly accurate replicas. The Lascaux II and Chauvet II facsimiles are not mere reproductions. They are full-scale reconstructions of the caves themselves, built above ground. Every bump on the wall, every drip of calcite, and every brushstroke is recreated with millimeter precision. Visitors can walk through these spaces, experiencing the awe of the chamber's scale and the intimacy of the art, all without harming the irreplaceable originals. These replicas are more than tourist attractions. They are an act of profound respect, a way to satisfy our deep need to witness these stories without becoming the reason the story ends. The ultimate challenge is one of value. Do we prioritize immediate access for this generation, or do we make the difficult choice to limit contact, ensuring that these time capsules remain intact for scientists and generations we will never meet? The caves have remembered for so long. The question is whether we can be the generation that finally learns how to listen without speaking. Our own minds might hold the key to the cave artist's intentions. Cognitive archaeology explores this connection, using modern psychological research to understand the universal mental processes that guided those ancient hands. Consider a simple fact of human vision: our innate tendency to see faces in clouds or figures in the grain of wood. This phenomenon, called pareidolia, helps explain why so many cave paintings are not just on the walls but of the walls. An artist would enter a chamber and see the potential in the limestone. A natural bump became the powerful shoulder of a bison. A crack in the rock transformed into the spine of a mammoth. They were not creating from a blank slate, but collaborating with the stone itself, seeing the hidden animals within, and using their pigments to bring them forth into visibility. This was a dialogue between the human mind and the natural world, a shared act of creation. This cognitive approach also sheds light on the mysterious abstract signs. In cultures without writing, memory is a practiced and vital skill. Psychological studies of oral storytellers show they use physical objects or environmental cues as memory palaces, anchoring complex stories to tangible markers. Those dots, lines, and zigzags covering the cave walls may have served a similar purpose. A specific series of marks could have been a schematic, a trigger for recalling an entire epic poem about ancestral heroes, or a detailed map of seasonal migration routes. The wall was not just a spiritual text, it was a hard drive, its geometric code preserving the essential information a culture needed to survive across generations. We see the roots of this symbolic impulse in the earliest years of life. Developmental psychology shows that the drive to represent the world through mark-making is a fundamental stage of human development, emerging spontaneously in young children. The evidence of children's handprints and finger flutings in the caves is no longer just a charming detail. It reveals a culture that recognized and nurtured this innate human capacity, integrating their youngest members into the community's most important symbolic practices from the very beginning. The universal act of a child reaching out to make a mark on a wall connects us directly to the Paleolithic child doing the same thing, a shared cognitive milestone spanning 40,000 years. So how do we cross the vast interpretive gap to their world? We start by recognizing that while their beliefs were unique, the underlying machinery of their perception, memory, and symbolic thought was fundamentally the same as our own. The same brain that looks at a random stain on the ceiling and sees a shape, the same mind that creates a story to remember a complex idea, and the same youthful hand that instinctively reaches for a crayon, all existed in the flickering torchlight. We are not deciphering aliens, we are listening for an echo of our own deepest cognitive rhythms, amplified and given magnificent form on a canvas of stone. What other universal human experiences are silently encoded in the lines of a painted horse or the palm of a ghostly hand? These underground libraries hold the first chapters of our shared human story, a narrative written in ochre and charcoal across thousands of silent years. From the majestic lions of Chauvet to the enigmatic dots and handprints scattered across Indonesia, each mark is a direct conduit to an ancient mind, a voice speaking across an unimaginable gulf of time. The very existence of these spaces proves that the need to create something permanent, to shout our existence into the future, is woven into the deepest fabric of our being. We were never just survivors, we were storytellers, scientists, and spiritual seekers from the very beginning, using the earth itself as our first and most durable canvas. The sophisticated tools we now use to listen to these echoes, from reading the genetic whispers in the soil to rebuilding entire lost landscapes in digital light, only deepen the mystery and the wonder. They peel back layers not of rock but of meaning, revealing a past far more complex and intellectually rich than we ever imagined. As our technology evolves, these caves promise to yield even more profound secrets. What will we learn when we can trace every pigment to its source and map the entire network of prehistoric thought? How will our understanding of art, community, and the human spirit be transformed by the next message we decode from the dark? The caves that remember are not just a window to our past, they are a mirror reflecting the timeless, universal urges that still drive us to create, to connect, and to leave our own mark on the world. Share in the comments which of these ancient discoveries resonated most deeply with you, and subscribe to join us as we continue to uncover history's greatest mysteries together.